How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? It's LorOnline here again today with another video, and today we are going to be going over the future potential strongholds and decorations that could be added to Star Wars: The Old Republic in the upcoming year. And as always, I'm going to be talking about my own personal preferences here, so strongholds I'd like to see added that may not necessarily be added, but I feel would definitely benefit the game as a whole. Then the plan is to go over to the forums and talk about what you guys have found out and what strongholds you'd like to see, so I'm going to be doing a little bit of crowd engagement here, and if you'd like to get more involved, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, and we'll talk about your stronghold down there. And sort of to conclude, I'm going to go over a concept idea I had, as well as a few other concept ideas for decorations and things that could definitely be improved in the game. Anyway, that's enough for the introduction. You guys sit back and prepare yourself for some serious Star Wars content. Alright, so let's start the video. I'm sure all of you are very aware that Star Wars: The Old Republic is not the only MMO with a stronghold system or a housing-like system. Competing MMOs such as World of Warcraft do in fact have player housing. They have their own system called Garrisons, which doesn't actually work as well. It is sort of like a Facebook game. You drag and drop the housing plots you want with the various nodes you'd like to put them in, similar to the WildStar plug system, but ultimately it was a bit of a flop, got very bad feedback, and didn't work out as well from a customer satisfaction perspective. While Star Wars: The Old Republic has had exceptional feedback on the Stronghold system, I personally really enjoy it, and I feel it's very immersive to have my own place in the game. And of course, let's not forget the customization in Star Wars: The Old Republic. You can have a very bespoke house, and you can do as you want with it. You can create a pirate stronghold, you can create a Sith stronghold, you can create a Jedi stronghold, you can create a stronghold that's very niche to your likings, and that is why, of course, it is beating most MMOs in that field. So that is how Homestead/Strongholds operate in Star Wars: The Old Republic. If we move on now to the MMO industry in general, there is a competing MMO called Elder Scrolls Online, which I am actually a player of and a big fan of at the moment because how well the MMO is doing. But ultimately, that MMO is about to become a problem for Star Wars: The Old Republic, as they are about to bring out a new Homestead system themselves. Their Homestead system is going to consist of 40 strongholds. Now, if you compare that to Star Wars: The Old Republic, if we were suddenly given 40 strongholds, I think we'd all be going a bit manic. They have 40 strongholds, all of which are similar sizes to our strongholds, so of course the devs have really gone out of their way there, and they are also going to have 2,000 furniture items, which is already surpassing Star Wars: The Old Republic's pre-existing 1,270 decoration items. My point in summary is more or less that Star Wars: The Old Republic needs to step up and bring out some more strongholds very soon if they want to compete with Elder Scrolls Online. So, Lawrence, what strongholds? Well, that's the point of this video. What strongholds would we like to see in Star Wars: The Old Republic? Now, I'm going to go through my own personal favourite strongholds first of all, which I've chosen purely based on my experience in the game. Then I'm going to move on to community requested strongholds, so ideas you guys have had on the forums, on various videos, on Reddit, that sort of thing. Now, without further ado, I'm going to be talking about my very first planet, or the ideal planet anyway, and that is Reishi. Now, I feel Reishi has earned a stronghold purely because it is probably one of the most beautiful planets in the game. It has this constant pirate theme, and it is very notorious for having that beautiful landscape. The trees there are really well textured, and if you look off into the distance, you always have this really nice shoreline that always just looks so beautiful. And I feel if they optimized that, if they were to add sort of an environment where you could stand on a balcony of your stronghold and look off into the distance and just observe the sunset and the scenery of Reishi, you'd really get a feel for the planet, and it would really be very immersive. And honestly, I don't understand why they haven't done this yet. They're making tons of money from the game. I have tons of my friends continuously telling me about what they've purchased on the cartel market. New players are always on the cartel market. There's always someone sort of feeding the game money, whether it's from subscriptions or cartel coin purchases. They should have enough income to sort of make cool strongholds. But instead, there seems to be a fair bit of a block when it comes to strongholds like this. Reishi is such popular demand, it's something that they should definitely consider. In addition to Reishi already being a somewhat beautiful planet, there are already hundreds of various decorations in the game that would suit a Reishi stronghold. As you know, we already have the Reishi traders and the Reishi villagers, so they already have the population there. But they've also got Reishi huts, they've got various Reishi banners, they've got flags of course from Reishi, there are various Reishi arrangements you can get, including baskets and crates, as well as a whole bunch of cool pirate-like cartel items, including the Reishi pirate cannon, the Reishi lamppost. Of course, there is the storm carrier rocket that you get from Ravengers, as well as ceiling lights and various holo signs, like with the pirate grog holo sign and the ship port. And there's always the dancer. So there are a various selection of decorations that could be applied to a Reishi stronghold. On top of all of that, there is already an ideal location on the horizon of Reishi that a lot of fans have pointed out, where in fact there is a stronghold-looking structure in the side of a mountain. And the developers could easily just build an environment or create an instance that is similar to that structure in the distance and have that as the player's stronghold. And I think that would be a really cool addition to the game because you'd be able to have a much more vibrant pirate life environment in the game that you can immerse yourself in, and that is what Star Wars: The Old Republic is all about. So they should definitely consider adding a Rishi Stronghold. In summary, I'd actually argue that Rishi is the ideal place to have a stronghold, purely because it has a vast array of flora that would make great decorations, and also it has this pirate theme that's very predominant on the planet and very immersive. Anyway, that's enough about Rishi. Moving on now, I'd like to think that this is actually a rather good idea. Now, I'm not sure if many of you will agree, because it's not a highly thought after planet. Not many people have enjoyed the leveling experience, including myself, but a stronghold here might be a little bit different, and that is the planet of Taurus. Now, don't get me wrong, I've never really enjoyed Taurus in general. The leveling experience has always been a bit dull, and I've always felt that it's a bit of a gloomy planet. But in terms of homesteads, I feel that it actually offers a rather large opportunity to the devs. I actually mean that it allows the devs to perhaps implement a PvE aspect to strongholds. Now, of course, strongholds over time do get very boring, I'm sure you all agree. Walking around doing nothing, if you're perhaps RPing, that's of course very interesting, but over time, you get the same environments, gets very dull, very repetitive, and you just want to move to a different stronghold. Now, with the PvE system I've got in mind, I feel perhaps that maybe they could implement a button or an interactive switch of some kind that opens a blast door and allows rat ghouls to pour in, and then there could be a wave defense system in your stronghold, would just make the entire place much more engaging. Furthermore, I actually feel that Taurus offers a third dimension to strongholds. I know you have most strongholds offering perhaps a first floor and maybe a second floor if you have Coruscant or Dromund Cast, but they all feel very linear and very 2D. Now, with a Taurus stronghold, you could perhaps have pipes or various doors that you can crawl through and find your ways into different rooms. So there's just more ways of obtaining different areas, have different doors to unlock, have different hidden routes, have just really cool immersive content in your stronghold to make it that bit more engaging to push players to go and get a stronghold rather than just not waste the credits. Now, I'm not sure what you guys think of that idea, that's just me, but for now we're going to leave that and move on to our next stronghold. Now, the stronghold I'm going to be talking about next is a stronghold I feel should come out sooner rather than later, purely because the planet came out with Kotet, and I don't really want it to go past its time, if that makes sense. The planet I'm referring to is actually Iocath. Now, Iocath is a very new planet, and of course, if they're going to do Taurus, they shouldn't do Iocath, because Iocath and Taurus is very similar in appearance. It's all desolate and destroyed, and I feel if they're going to go one way, they should stick that way and not go back, so if they're going to do one stronghold, don't do both, basically. But the reason Iocath is somewhat titillating is because it was such an interesting planet. The lore there is very in-depth and diverse, it is very mysterious and complicated, and I'd love to think that they could make some form of high-tech dome-like stronghold. If you guys have seen the recent League of Legends expansion for Warwick, there is a planet or zone featured that is called Zune. I'll reference it on screen now, but what I'm saying is I'd like to think that BioWare could perhaps create an environment that's inside this dome that's very pretty and natural, a whole bunch of new fauna and a whole bunch of new plant life, that sort of thing, and then outside would just be this barren wasteland attached to the dome, so you'd look out your dome basically and see nothing but trash and devastation, but where you're actually in it, the place you're actually standing is just beautiful, majestic, everything looks nice, and there could be some really cool textures, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's sort of my argument in favor of Iocath. And of course, there are actually examples of these like facilities existing on Iocath. If you look into the distance, there are actually some box sort of dome-like structures that harbour in some form of plant life. So the facilities do exist, but whether or not they're going to turn into a stronghold is yet to be seen. And I'd like to think maybe in the near future, they'd perhaps consider making an Iocath stronghold. And now that's enough of Iocath. I'm going to move on to my next planet on this list, and that is the Sith homeworld of Korriban. Now, I'd imagine a lot of you would probably argue against this because we already have the Tatooine Stronghold, and the Korriban Stronghold wouldn't make much sense because there are already two Southern Planet Strongholds, and as it is, there are not really enough strongholds to cover all environments, so it's a very sort of bespoke ask. But I feel Korriban ultimately offers a huge range of potential in terms of lore for the player. If you were to perhaps own your own Korriban temple and you were to walk around it, similar to how with Yavin you could get those binoculars out and see all the Yavin lore around you, in Korriban you could perhaps click on various runes or stones and read up on various lore about the Korriban way of life and the culture of the Sith, which I think would be so bloody engaging. I'd love to go to a planet in those circumstances. On top of that, you'd also have that amazing RP potential there where people could have their own Korriban academies and they'd be able to RP with other Sith and tell them, hey, you're becoming apprentice, you're going to become the next Lord of the Sith, I'm going to betray you, rah, you know, that RP scene. Whilst in addition, players could go to their stronghold to learn and research the lore, and lock more and more rooms to find out more about the backstory of Korriban, more about various Sith, and it could become sort of a library of sorts for the player base, and I feel that's something BioWare needs to focus more on, because at the moment the game is so focused so much on its own niche Zakul narrative that they're not really paying attention to the grand scheme of Star Wars as it stands, and they're not really appealing to the true fans of George Lucas's work and the work of the expanded universe. And that is truly the only reason I feel that perhaps Korriban should be considered, purely because it would add a much more lore-friendly environment for new players and would encourage much more engagement in the RP community. So that's something they should definitely consider over at BioWare. Moving on now to a similar planet that may not work necessarily with the lore of the game as it stands at the moment, but I'd like to think that perhaps in the future they could perhaps make a foundation for this planet, and that is of course Tython. Now, the problem with Tython is it was destroyed by the Empire during the assault on Tython, and unfortunately that is the only temple site on the planet at the moment that we are aware of, because it was discovered, of course, by SWTOR and the rest of the Council more recently. Whilst Korriban has been around for centuries, and the people of Korriban have multiple temples set up, so it would make more sense there to be temples on Korriban, whilst Tython only has the one, as far as we know. Unless they reference an older temple from the original era, I don't know, but there isn't really a stable way of actually making this stronghold work. Nevertheless, if they did implement this temple, I would actually be astonished and rather amazed, because not only would it be a great feat for Jedi Knight guilds out there, but it would also add a whole new perspective to the planet of Tython. Because I'm sure most of us now are pretty bored of Tython. I mean, I know I personally am. I've leveled through it 10 or 20 times, and I despise the planet in general now just because it's the starting zone. And of course, I've always hated the Flesh Raiders there, but after the assault on Tython, the Flesh Raiders are now, well, supposedly extinct. I'm not 100% sure on that fact, but I think the original camp has been destroyed, so there's probably not many Flesh Raiders left, which is definitely a plus. So the idea of going back there and sort of revamping the planet in the form of a stronghold, seeing how it is, in its beauty, all the serenity and all the Jedi mumbo-jumbo stuff, would really enhance the game, I feel, ultimately. But the way I'd actually want BioWare to execute this magical stronghold on Tython is by basically taking the Coruscant stronghold, that really big one, and making a replica version of it on Tython. So you get that sort of huge room feeling, like it's oversized, but I feel for a temple that would be really good. And if you were to get something like 150 members, and all of them were like getting socially involved with the roleplay aspect of the game, it would really enhance the life in the stronghold, and bigger guilds could really get something out of it. Of course, smaller guilds may have to limit themselves to a room to sort of make the RP somewhat immersive, but if you were to get a really big guild, you want to have a stronghold that can manage that, and the Tatooine stronghold and the Yavin stronghold don't really cut it if you've got 150 people, whilst I feel a Tython stronghold with a Coruscant-themed temple would really get the hype going again for the larger guilds. So that is my concluding statement, basically, for why I feel they should add a Tython stronghold. Anyway, that's enough about me. That's my personal strongholds. Nothing much there. I mean, it's not 100% original. I'm sure people have come up with this stuff before or something similar along the lines on the forums, but that's how I want to do it from my original perspective. Now, I want to focus more on the community strongholds, basically strongholds that have been highly discussed and demanded on the forums, as well as Reddit and of course in the various YouTube videos. The first on my list of highly fought for strongholds is the Oda Stronghold. Now, I really want this stronghold as well. I completely agree with what everyone's saying about it. I'd love to have a house, or the ability to create a house on Alderaan, and basically name it after myself. The House of Loranous. That'd be pretty damn cool. Or, of course, have something around LorOnline, some cool little house thing. But yeah, the idea of having all these big, noble, rich, posh walls, having all the temples. I mean, I'm sure some of you have walked around House Organa, how big and immersive that place is. When you walk outside of the big, massive King Palace, you have that really nice walkway and the cityscape that feels almost like it's from the future. You look around and it has the really nice smooth platforms. You have the bridges going across other bridges, and then you have various sites and buildings around the area. What I'd like them to do with an Alderaan stronghold is perhaps make it so you can put in buildings. I know that's sort of only been discussed and has only been mentioned in other MMOs, like World of Warcraft, of course, has this plug feature, and so does WildStar. But I'd like them to maybe add it in Star Wars The Old Republic and make sure they execute it right, of course. I don't want some Facebook game. I'm talking about just putting in various rooms where you want them and basically having your instance more personalized to you. And with an Alderaan stronghold, a house, or a stronghold of that size, I feel it would be very engaging to be able to create your own plots and then add the furniture to each plot, and then of course maybe add filters so you can have like a darker atmosphere or a lighter atmosphere. But I'm basically rewriting the entire system here, but you get it. The Alderaan stronghold, I feel, could be something really special, and they could really go the extra mile with it. So that is primarily why I'd like them to add an Alderaan stronghold, just because how grand and magnificent it could be if they added the right customization options. Moving on from Alderaan anyway, I know I didn't really go into much detail there, but I feel it doesn't need as much detail because an Alderaan stronghold is an Alderaan stronghold. It will look magnificent because it's on Alderaan. However, this stronghold I'm about to discuss has been highly fought for as well. This one is probably the most discussed more lately because of Knights of the Fallen Empire and Kotet, but that is the planet of Oda. Now, I think Oda would be a great place to have a stronghold, purely because it's got so much relevance to the current storyline, with the Alliance Commander, of course, being the protagonist of every campaign now. It would make sense for them to have a house on Oda. Another key fact about Odessen that I really like is primarily the feel it has to it. It's similar to Alderaan in a sense, but then also has a bit of ornamental with it, if that makes sense. You sort of have this rocky terrain, it feels a bit more 3D landscape, a bit hilly, whilst most of the locations that you go to in the game, like Tatooine, are very flat. I really like Odessen because it has a third dimension to it. Any planet that adds a third dimension, like Reishi for example, really gets me hyped up. Now, the fear I primarily have with it is that they're just going to take the already existing Alliance base and turn that into a homestead. I wouldn't enjoy that at all because I'll be sitting there the entire time saying, God, stop retexturing. You guys are capable. You have the dev team. It doesn't cost that much more. Just go out of your way, do some retextures, make it a bit nicer, and then give the stronghold to us. I would really hate them to just retexture the already existing Alliance base. Now, if they manage to dodge that, I feel the best way for them to execute this stronghold would be to have a facility or a central hub that you'd unlock when you buy the stronghold. Then you'd have a whole bunch of locked doors, and what you can do is you can unlock the door and then decide what you're going to build behind that door. So you can have a radar room, for instance, on one side of your base, but you have to pay, of course, a certain amount of extra credits to have it built into the radar room. You could have a living quarters in one area, you could have a kitchen or whatever in another area, a garden life paradise, something on those lines, but you could put them where you want around your stronghold rather than have the linear default barracks to your left, the radar rooms to your front, you get the idea. So I'd like them to perhaps have a system where you can choose where the rooms are going to be in proportion to where you're centralized. And that would sort of be a perfect stronghold, and all they'd have to really add then is a few different decors that could perhaps be more bespoke to an Oda stronghold, something more on the lines of military alliance stuff, some more perhaps niche rooms, technology things, different types of desk computers, underground sonar devices, things that would look much better in an underground stronghold. And once they've done that, I feel the stronghold will be sussed, and it would probably generate a fair bit of positive feedback. But I completely agree with what everyone's saying on the forums for Oda. It would make an excellent stronghold. So there we have it, Oda. That is a really cool idea for a stronghold, I think, personally. But the next one on this list I feel is even better, and that is Maghreb. Now, there is a small little problem with Maghreb in lore, and that is that the planet's kind of not there, but it kind of is. It's alright-ish, I guess. I mean, it's very difficult to explain Maghreb. I mean, in the storyline, you basically mess up the planet with all the drilling. Like, there's always fear of stuff collapsing, but I feel that it could still most definitely have a stronghold. I don't think it would be that difficult to do. I feel it wouldn't necessarily interrupt with the lore too much. I mean, it kind of does. But ultimately, I just feel it needs to be done because Maghreb is such a beautiful planet, and there is already concept art out there of houses on Maghreb. So it makes sense for them to go out of their way just to quickly throw together a quick stronghold, maybe with the pre-existing textures. I don't mind specifically how they do it because Maghreb is a beautiful planet as it stands. I would just really like a Maghreb stronghold in the next upcoming year. The question is, how do they go about doing it? And unfortunately, there isn't really an easy way to answer that because it is a very difficult stronghold to implement, especially with the atmospheric problems as well as the excavation problems. There are a fair few issues in lore that would make it somewhat problematic. But if they do find a way around these problems, I think personally the best way to execute it would be to have a manor house or a mansion form of house on top of one of the larger mountainsides. Have it so it's actually on the very top when you get a view of all of Maghreb down below, and actually focus on primarily the exotic sort of resort style of the building. So it should be very slick, like ancient Greek themed, but have a very modern style to it. It's a bit complicated to explain, but you know how the buildings already look in Maghreb. Sort of go for a manor house like that, and then of course interpret it so it's a bit more player friendly. That's all there really is to say about the Maghreb Stronghold. All we can really do is keep our fingers crossed and hope one day they bring it out. Right, so for the second to last stronghold I'm going to mention today, this is a stronghold that is sort of a different environment entirely, and I feel that it's sort of needed because there isn't currently an existing environment that's similar to this, but the second to last stronghold today is Hoth. Now I feel Hoth is actually heavily demanded primarily because it's not really an environment that's frequently featured in Star Wars The Old Republic. It's a very unique area of the game, and having a stronghold that's just as unique would be rather appealing, I think, for most of the player base. Now, based on what players have said on the forums, it looks like that Hoth needs to be an environment that allows for underground tunnels, some form of ice area perhaps, and they really need to put emphasis on that. They need to really start showing off some of the ice in the place, and I think perhaps having facilities for pets, maybe a Wampa cave or something along those lines in your Hoth stronghold, a lot of outside environments, and then of course an indoor environment as well. The interior specifically needs to be very warm and cozy, so you sort of get that feeling of contrast between the warm inside, perhaps a metal shell of a building with some warm furnishings, maybe a fireplace area, something like that. And then outside, it would be this really cold, barren, dusk environment that would be appealing in the sense that it's such a contrast between the inside and the outside, and that's how they should probably go about executing it. What I feel they should do actually with the Hoth Stronghold as well is as maybe a little bit of a bonus, a little bit of a hidden thing, maybe have some Easter eggs or references to the movie, because Star Wars The Old Republic really doesn't have many Easter eggs. I mean, I wanted to do a top 10 Easter eggs in Star Wars The Old Republic, but there really weren't any, so I feel a Hoth place would be a really good opportunity to maybe implement a Wampa thing, or some relation to Luke, or some relation to the Rebel base, just something that's a little bit more fun, because Star Wars The Old Republic is an MMO, and they can always do with a little bit of extra comedy in there. Anyway, that's about it for the Hoth speculation. I don't really want to go into much more detail because I don't want to have a fixed idea of it. I feel it's something that BioWare just needs to come up with naturally and progressively and give it a shot and see how it comes along, because I feel it would sell really well to the player base. Alright, so for our last Strongholds day, I'm basically just going to jump right in and say it. It's Manaan. Everyone on the forum wants it. I think it's fair to say more than 95% of the player base is all over the idea of having this Stronghold. There are a few lore issues with the Cath, but ultimately it is very plausible, and I feel they should definitely consider adding it. To clarify, I'm basically saying that Manaan is the ideal place to have a stronghold. I mean, if you actually look at it and look at the slick style, the Selkath theme that it has, all the Selkath consoles, the Selkath lounge chairs, all the pre-existing decor already looks beautiful. And if you were to put it in a slick and high-tech environment like Manaan, it would really stand out and look quite beautiful. Especially if they take advantage of the water level on Manaan. Perhaps they could have an above ground area where you could walk around and observe sort of the scenery and look off into the distance of Manaan. Perhaps a garage up there with perhaps a control hub, an easy way of teleporting in and out, maybe an elevator that goes down into like the underwater section where you can see out and perhaps see fish moving about, and maybe if they're willing to take it that extra step, you could go out and swim, because let's be honest, most MMOs now allow for swimming. I think SWTOR needs to perhaps catch up in that department. And maybe even have a feature where you can actually engage in underwater combat. Now, I know there was an example of this in the HK51 bonus series that you're able to get for being a subscriber during a certain month of Fallen Empire. Perhaps they could implement a feature like that, so you could go underwater and maybe do some fish battles or collect some rare fish parts for crafting. I don't know, but I'd like to think perhaps they could implement something along those lines. That's all that can really be said for Manaan, unfortunately. I really hope that they do go and give it a shot before the game sort of comes to an end, so hopefully sometime in the near future we'll see some really cool underwater stronghold. And that's it for Strongholds, I'm afraid. I have a quick concept to go over before we move on to decorations, but ultimately if you want to contribute to this conversation in any way, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below, and I will happily come along and reply to you. But for now, I want to quickly talk about a concept idea I had for sort of improving Uprisings. Alright, so this is probably the highlight of the video, if anything, because it's such an important topic to me and I feel it definitely needs to be improved, because at the moment Uprisings as they stand are incredibly boring, dull. They're of course retextures and I despise them in every way, shape or form, except for perhaps some of the mechanics that are somewhat interesting, but ultimately I just don't like the fact that they're these huge retextures. So I was trying to come up with a way to improve Uprisings whilst also optimizing their already existing features. The only solution I can actually come up with that doesn't completely ruin the Uprising system is if they perhaps fused the Uprising system with the Stronghold system and made it so people could create their own Uprisings. I know this sounds somewhat ridiculous, but you're going to have to bear with me here because I really think this idea could work, and I definitely think it would improve Uprisings in general. Now, the way I would implement it is you'd have a new tag. You'd have your Stronghold tag, your Guild Stronghold tags, your Key tag, and then you'd have your Uprisings tag. Under the Uprising tags, you could choose the map that already exists, so you could go and purchase your Uprising from a vendor, similar to how you purchase a Stronghold. You go and buy an Uprising area, so you buy Ord Mantell, for example. You then have the Ord Mantell instance to create your Uprising in. Then every time you do a flashpoint, or every time you do an operation and defeat a boss, you can then put that boss into your Uprising. The difficulty level of the boss will be determined on the difficulty level of the flashpoint or operations you've already completed. So if you go and, for example, defeat Nightmare Styrax, you'll be able to put Nightmare Styrax into your operation. And the way they could actually implement these tiles is you could have a large tile for a larger boss fight, so they could be like the centerpiece tiles. Then for a medium boss fight or a flashpoint boss fight, you could have like the purple tiles that are just for large items. So you can actually have it implemented sort of into the already existing Homestead system, but you make it just in your Uprising instead of in your Homestead. Then of course you can add decorations and you can add ads, and you could get these ads maybe from cartel packs, because I know EA likes plugging money as much as they can, and the ads also could perhaps be obtained from quests or doing various things, just basically how we already obtain cartel items today, just you could add it to Uprisings. I'm not 100% sure how the idea would play out. There are no immediate barriers that come to mind. I've done a little bit of research before this video for about a day and a half for this specific section, and I wasn't 100% sure if there would be any issues. Based on what I've seen on the forums, there aren't very many problems around this, and if there are any problems, it could be solved by common sense. Nevertheless, I do have hopes for this. I do think it could definitely be a fix to the already existing Uprising system, and they'd be able to justify retextures, because that is a huge issue at the moment, and I cannot emphasize it enough. Retextures is not a good thing. It is something an MMO should never do, and if they do it, it needs to be minimalized to a specific instance. For example, caves maybe, just about justifiable as long as you add alterations to the caves, but to completely copy and paste something from a pre-existing instance, even if it's in the form of an Uprising instead of a Flashpoint, I just think that's ultimately wrong and they should never really do that. So that's enough of Uprising, Strongholds, and all of that. We're going to put that to one side for now and talk more about decorations. Now, decorations, of course, come under the category of Strongholds, but are more bespoke, and I'd like to actually talk about a few decorations that I feel should definitely be in the game, and should have been in the game yesterday, so we need to sort of get those out there, so Eric, Musco, or whoever's going to watch this decides, we should add those to the game. Anyway, let's jump right into this. Right, so decorations. I'm going to quickly start off with a few utility decorations that definitely need to be added to the game and I think should have been in the game yesterday. So first up on this beautiful list is green screens. I'm not sure if this is a bespoke thing or if this is a general thing, but I really do feel like green screen should be in the game now. I mean, we've been playing this for 5 years now, and there are a lot of people who create content on YouTube, and a green screen is just so essential to making content. I mean, you need the background removed for certain scenes. I've got a whole bunch of stuff with Boberto, so I try to do in my machinimas, and the issue I have is I haven't actually got a green screen in game. There's nowhere I can go in game to get this green screen effect, so I end up just basically going to Drone and Cast. I have a black screen, which isn't anywhere near as good, and the quality is a bit of a mess sometimes, but that's sort of how I have to make do. So that would be a really nice recommendation. If Eric, Musco, or someone sees this, please put a green screen in the game. We need it. Right, moving on to the next utility item we need, and of course we need quest hubs. Now, I feel that a lot of people have argued that we don't need quest hubs because players need to go to the fleet to go and get quests and so forth, but if there's like heroic missions on all the planets, you know that quest hub I'm talking about specifically, where it lists all the heroic missions, gives you all of the fast travels, I think that's safe to put in a stronghold. I don't think it's that much of an issue. I hate going to the fleet, literally to run around to the Uprising area just to click that stupid terminal. I mean, I really just want it at my base so I can just click it when I'm in my AFK time, then fly to these planets to go do these heroics. So a quest hub I feel would be a great stronghold item. So we'll jump right into the next item here and move on to the social media hub. Now, I feel that this is something that most games do have in some way, shape or form, a way of accessing the social media links in-game. What I think they should do is maybe add an item but that you can click on that allows you to put a link into it, so when people click on it, it will pop up with the "You are leaving the Star Wars The Old Republic site, are you sure you wish to continue? Yes," and then it takes you to this site, and it could be whatever you want it to be. So it could be like a Twitter account, it could be a YouTube account, it could be a, whatever. So the idea is you can just have it in your stronghold, and if you have someone looking around your stronghold and you want to send them to an external site, like your guild site, you just click that thing, and it sends you to their site. So that was an idea I thought would be very useful for the game and very beneficial overall. Right, so we've already covered all the utility decor. That really didn't take very long, did it? But, it's just a little bit of decor. Not going to take forever. Anyway, let's move on to cosmetic decor. Now, this is a much bigger topic. Of course, the game needs to keep adding cosmetic decor to keep the player base enthusiastic about the cartel market, and of course to keep the player base enthusiastic about strongholds in general. For this section, however, I'd rather much leave it up to you guys. I feel cosmetic decor is something that we all individually have a preference in, and in order to get a non-biased opinion, we all need to contribute somewhat to this sort of conversation. But I'm going to go over some general topics that I feel should be perhaps added to the game or enhanced a bit more because there's limited items in these specific fields. Now, the first items I'm going to be discussing on this list are Jedi and Sith themed decor. If you are a Jedi and you're trying to create a Jedi guild or a Jedi temple of some description, it is very difficult to find an abundance of Jedi decorative items. If you've played the game before, you know for a fact that there are the odd themed Jedi items that show up every now and again in cartel packs. For example, the fountain, the Jedi temple fountain. There's the holocron of the Ancient Masters, which is a big cosmetic piece which looks really nice. The large crystal formation, if you have that in purple or cyan, both of which look really nice if you're creating a Jedi themed environment. Then of course there are all the little signs and symbols, and you can get various chairs like the temple chair, and there's the vases you can get which look really nice, temple clocks for example, and there's the arrangement as well you can get called the Throne of Enlightenment, which looks really nice if you're going for that council chamber feel. But if you're trying to create a full out academy, you're going to need so much more decor. You're going to need various rooms and various designs, various themes, you're going to need different colours. And of course the game doesn't actually offer enough content thus far that allows a player to go out and actually create their own niche Jedi Academy. It's just going to be a clone of the next and the next and the next, and the environment just becomes very dull. So they need to definitely add a lot more decoration to the game. Which leads us on to our very final topic, and that is pirate-themed decor. Now, I've never had a problem with the amount of pirate-themed decor in the game. I don't feel like there is a short supply of it. I think there is plenty of choice out there. But with the amount of pirate-themed content there actually is in the game, when you go to Reishi, there are like 400 different stands that you can't get on the cartel market, and you can't get as a decoration. There are like various signposts which you can't get. There are various bridges and themes and textures which you can't really put into your stronghold. And what I'd like them to do is turn it into decorations. So you can basically throw it in your stronghold and basically chill with it. Now, one of those I think that I should highlight is the fireplace in the Rishi Cath. I definitely feel like this game needs a fireplace. Like a proper Rishi pirate-themed fireplace that just can add light to a room. And that's also why I wanted them to perhaps consider adding filters at one point, so you could have darker strongholds, then throw lights in it, or throw candle flames, or throw fireplaces, and that would light up the room in a certain way, and you can add like a dark emphasis to your rooms, things like that. I know it's a little thing, but I know they can add filters because Ilum itself, the planet, actually has a filter, so I don't think it'd be that difficult to apply it to strongholds and have it so people can buy their own filters for their strongholds. Don't know if that's realistic or not, but I feel pirate-themed decor definitely could do with a little bit of a boost so that you don't get the same old repetitive stuff. So there we have it, guys. That's my video. I feel like we've definitely gone over strongholds quite extensively, and we've definitely touched up on decorations to some degree. So there we have it, guys. If you want to get involved, feel free to go down to the comment section down below, and I'll happily reply to your comments. And of course, if you like this video, feel free to hit that like button. It means a lot. And there is always the referral link, the holy grail of Star Wars: The Old Republic content. If you hit that, you get a whole bunch of cool free stuff. I get a whole bunch of cartel coins, which can go towards my RP series, which I really hope I get to do someday, but that requires making friends on my server, something I'm not great at. So, there we have it, guys. Thank you all for watching today. I really hope you've enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Bye, guys.